About the activities going on at Sky Television was, I detailed this in a series of emails to my line management so that it got into the computer system, was that the BBC approached me, a senior member of the BBC approached me at the Glastonbury Crop Circle Symposium at the bed and breakfast, and on a Sunday morning, and he detailed very specifically that the BBC was using mind control activities on the general population.
Good, okay.
His task was to monitor these mind control activities that the BBC was doing on the general population and report exclusively to one man, and he was talking about the John Birt era. So he was personally reporting to John Birt under the instruction of John Birt. Mm-hmm. He also said that John Birt was not human.
Ooh.
Now, this is a bit of an inside joke in the BBC, in that John Birt was often portrayed as a Dalek in BBC, happy programs, the Christmas tapes. The BBC crews and editors and things would compile a Christmas tape at the end of the year of all the gaffes and fuck-ups and all the sort of horrendous things that happen at the BBC, which are now in all these blooper shows. This was the pioneer to blooper shows, because they were so much fun that a few people started knocking them off, making VHSs on them, and they got into the black market, and oh dear, the shocking, Princess Anne would swear, oh what a terrible thing. Stuff like that. But the point was that by portraying John Birt as a Dalek means that there are people at the BBC who are aware of the extent of the mind control and whatever other activities are going on there. And this was code to people who were watching that, yes, this confirms that John Birt was in fact a non-human entity who was operating the BBC.
God. Wow.
Now the point about all this is that really anybody who studies this subject would not be surprised in the least that there would be alien and non-human controlling technologies and abilities happening with broadcasting. And this is the key to my work in the pirate radio business. I've been very privileged to operate two of the highest powered FM stations ever broadcast in Ireland. I've been very, very privileged and honoured to work with some of the finest and best and most decent people I've ever encountered. People who worked on Radio Caroline and the magnificent pirate stations in Ireland like Radio Nova, Kiss FM and Sunshine Radio, all who had a sort of a common link of free thinking and loving awareness, and a lot of those really good close friends of mine have now since passed on. So I'm one of the few people left who had the story to tell.
Ooh, okay.
And this is why when we were going to launch Energy 106, which, without getting into the details of that story, it was again of no particular surprise that the guy who asked me to put that on the air was himself abducted 4 times.
Gosh.
And it was no particular surprise when an MI6 agent came up to me. He was a British guy who worked in Ireland, said it was a British military operation. They had pirate radio station.
Okay.
So, we weren't stupid. You don't stick on 1,000,000 watts from a tower, bolted into solid concrete on a hill within 150 metres of the Irish border, with British military observation posts on the northern side looking in on us, and sort of getting away with it for 9 years.
Wow.
Strange that nobody found out where we were. So that's obviously bollocks. So the point about it is that when we noticed, and including we in this, because I've got other colleagues who were more than aware of what was going on.
Okay.
We had white spheres, spatial distortion issues. We were transmitting signals which weren't coming from our transmitters because somebody else was using the site. We had a link with the pyramid in Egypt. We had entities and other sorts of things going on in St. Patrick's Chair and Well. And the reason why it's called St. Patrick's Chair and Well, which is a nearby ancient stone site beside the transmitter, is because when St. Patrick was dispatched by the Roman Church to destroy the Celtic Church of Ireland and enslave Ireland under the most appalling bestial satanic cult, which is everybody knows as the Vatican. Anybody who's done any research on this knows that South Park joke about it with the giant spider controlling the Vatican. What does this giant spider entity thing really symbolize? You know, this is all out there, right? So the point about it is, it's no surprise when that happens. So leading quickly forward on to 2010, and this is very important because I've just interviewed another guy who features in 2010 as well. So 2010 is a very important wake-up year, and it was the last 6 months of 2010. A lot of stuff I started activating at Sky. I've been monitoring a lot of very strange activities at Sky. It's particularly black orbs, black creatures, shadow entities. Other people had come to me and expressed dimensional effects, which I'd also noticed. For instance, the new Sky complex, Harlequin 1, is not in this space-time domain because it doesn't obey the same simple rules of perspective that the surrounding area does, which means there's a distortion there, which means it's not quite stable in this reality. So we were observing all that. That was activated with the death of a workman who accidentally was killed by a lot of stuff coming off a truck. These kind of things are used in ritual magic to activate these kind of buildings and areas. So the point is, and the super soldiers also confirmed that there's a lot of very toxic alien energy active at Sky. And so so the broadcasters are dealing with it. So we got the BBC involved with all this, with the Jimmy Savile stuff, satanic ritual, the satanic cult, the Ring of Fire, the Savile family itself, going back to Norman the Conqueror, William the Conqueror, 1066 and all that, gave the Savile family all of Yorkshire as a reward. So I'm not saying that Jimmy Savile himself was linked with that, but he's a Savile.
Yeah.
The Savile family were given the whole of Yorkshire for the reward for the invasion of this country. So we're dealing with further links with entities invading. Okay, the general theme being invading. Energy 106's final frequencies, which we changed to due to certain issues with the antenna system. We ended up ending up on 106.6, so that was 1066. William the Conqueror, Savile. These are what's called matrix signatures.
Yes.
The little hallmarks which follow a line. Okay.
Okay.
So the point about this is we've got a right mess. We've got broadcasting being used as an alien-sourced reality or consciousness construct controlling mechanism. Okay? So one of the things which I noticed at Sky Television was the pea in a pod phenomena. If you can imagine you've got 10 peas in a pod, and everybody's together, when you get an extra pea in the pod, nobody knows where the peas come from, but everybody just for that second gets a little bit squashed, right? And likewise, when the 11th pea goes and you're back to 10 peas, you then have a situation where local space-time slightly modifies itself and expands a bit. So, in other words, there's more relative space for you in that space-time than there would be. So something comes and goes, you get a little change. So we were aware of this kind of activity. I did a lot of dowsing, and a lot of people used to see me with these almighty thick dowsing rods, which I've still got in a suitcase somewhere. And the reason why I've got 10mm threaded bar, which are heavy bars of threaded bar, threaded rod, is that if I used anything lighter, the amount of energy that was there would cause these things to spin so violently they behave like Chinook helicopter blades.
Wow.
Two things spiraling such intensity, which means there was a huge amount of energy being pumped in around there, which means clearly there was a whack-a-maps of very esoteric, externally dimensional and intradimensional activity going on at what was an intelligence transfer sequence activated project, because I initially tried to get Robert Maxwell to start Sky. He wasn't going to work. I talked to him personally, but we were going to run it out of the Isle of Man. That wasn't going to happen. So Murdoch was chosen as the mechanism, and I use the term mechanism, to action a replacement to the BBC monopoly on transmission systems and facilities in this country via their transmission network.
Okay, so who chose Murdoch?
I did.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So Murdoch was used as a vehicle with the finance and the clout to enable multi-channel satellite delivered television with
Yes.
multiple different abilities of other people to get their voice heard,
Yes.
to action that into this part of the world, because there's no other way it was going to happen. The pirates had reached as far as they could go, so this was the handoff period in 1988 through 1989, which created, so Kiss FM, my station, which the logo's up there somewhere, that was a 1.2 megawatt FM blaster into Belfast where we cracked Matrix. We had a big UFO came down and say hi to us at the very end before we closed down.
Wow.
And that was the point about thing I talk about cracking Matrix. It means we imparted a sufficient amount of thought energy to crack the reality matrix construct which had been imposed by the non-human entities trying to take this planet. Now when you crack matrix, you send a series of cracks through it. You don't break it. Okay? So it's a bit like a fly in a windscreen with a stone in it. You've got a bit of a problem there. That windscreen's going to fail at some period of time.
Yeah.
So the point about this is that Sky's a continuation of that. So that was running fine. The BSB lot came in, and that's when a lot of the toxic energies came in. But the main secondary toxic energy, after I warned my line management that the Sky suffered a major threat from China.
Wow.
Okay, the major threat from China was through two sources. One was a whole new management team which were being brought in from Hong Kong, which had been nicely programmed by the Chinese. And this has all been backed up by other individuals. So they came in, and they then set about making a nice little happy nest for themselves, but they made too many mistakes, revealed their positions, and one of them was a mechanism of how they took me out. So that revealed a source trail. They're probably still sitting there thinking they're hunky-dory and they're all safe and as bad as roses, but the Sky's now in free fall. That's to say, all the protection mechanisms which were employed to ensure it would be successful have now been terminated, and have been terminated now since December 2010.
How do they terminate?
Well, the point about it is basically it's got a certain amount of momentum which will keep continuing. If they wake up in time, they may be able to pull up before they hit the ground.
Okay.
Metaphorically speaking. Okay.
Okay.
So the point about this is that in 2010, with the BBC telling me that certain elements of BBC, that their Director General was an alien, and with certain Joker type people portraying John Burt as a Dalek, the Daleks are a fictional construct in Doctor Who.
Yes.
But the point about the Daleks is you're going back to 1962, I think, 63, when Doctor Who first started. Okay? And the crucial thing about Doctor Who was the very first episode simply went back to this dawn of man. Right?
Right.
With the cavemen.
Yeah.
Right? The second series of Doctor Who introduced the Daleks. So there you go. If you're going to have a TV series, and you may not know if you're going to have more than about 8 weeks to broadcast what you're going to say, you want to get your message across as quickly as possible. And that's what they did with Doctor Who.
Okay.
Way back in 1960, early 60s.
Right.
Now, anybody who monitors a certain number, a lot of this sort of so-called B-movies, science fiction B-movies that were coming out of Britain in the 1950s, there's a lot in there about all the stuff of active technology which is in use right now.
Okay.
For instance, acoustic resonant weapons that makes steel and aluminium just crust into dust, which is the Hutchison effect, which was used on 9/11 to make the Twin Towers collapse into dust with a resonant sonic or scalar weapon. Right?
Yeah.
There's a tacky science fiction film about that in a British lab in England circa 1957, and guess what? It also makes local space-time distort.
Yeah.
All of this means that they had the concept, the technology, and were telling you about it in 1957.
Wow.
Okay?
Yes.
In a lovely little manner,
Yeah.
in the quaint English countryside.
Unbelievable.
Okay,
Yeah.
1957. So all this stuff's in there. It's putting on the public domain. Just somebody, would you please look and see?
Yeah.
Take note.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm doing is trying to thread a lot of these things together because we're dealing with a space-time consciousness weapon system, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's happening right now. The space-time consciousness weapon system is now being powered up and is fully active and is now in progress. And that's what that book about Sam Jenkins is all about.
Okay.
Transhumanization, the end of humanity.
Wow.
Okay? So this brings us to the situation about the Sky situation, the BBC situation, where you've got all the ritual satanic, sodomic stuff going on in there, and the black energy and all the stuff that we detected in the transmitters, which we got from the BBC and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So having talked to Alistair, who was one of the guys I interviewed about the black goo, he actually did confirm that the black goo, in its virtual form or etheric form, would be seen as that in these transmitter systems.
Okay.
And I made a video about that in a transmitter which had been at BBC Sheriff's Mountain in London area as the transmitter for Q102. Hello. I made that video out there, and that's part of Basis, I think 4, part 2 or something or other with Lawrence John. No, it's Basis 8, I don't know what the hell it is, Basis 4. Which means we've done a lot of Basis since then.
You have.
Anyway, that was the black goo. Now the point about that is when I told a friend of mine about that on the phone, she picked up on it and went down the telephone, and she then got hit at the far end.
Ooh.
And she was quite badly damaged at the far end. So the point about it is this is an information thought-based carrier system, and it uses information carrying technologies such as telephones, radio, the electricity supply system to get into us, right?
Good God.
So what's one of the other things I discussed with Sam Jenkins was the centrally electrically generated grid. It has to be a grid, and it's a global grid, right? And it goes into every home, everywhere, and it's all connected together, right? That's a grid, global grid.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's an information carrying system with 2 cycles, 50 and 60 cycles electricity, depending where you are, and those frequencies were selected because I had certain mind sensitive issues, right? Now the point about all this is, sticking with the electricity supply system for a moment,
Go on.
the point about it is that we're now being I've just been speaking to Dr. Rani Kilda, who was sent into a paralytic fit when she was exposed to 3 LED sourced streetlights on her way back home from the summer solstice party in Soon, which I attended a week ago.
Right.
Now what happened was that whatever happened to her, she suddenly lost the use of her legs and collapsed, and she had to crawl along the ground until she was out of these lights. And then when she was out of these lights, she suddenly regained control of her legs and was able to walk home.
Okay.
And she was really insistent that she told me that just before I left. Now the point about these lights is, LED lights are being pushed as a, LED and the halogen lights are being pushed as an energy saving device, but they're not. What they are is they introduce mercuric toxins into the earth from the rare earth elements which are pushed into these damn things. So they're mined. At least they're part of the earth, so the earth,
Yes.
has them. But the point about them is they're multi-frequency lights. That should tell you something. It should be an alarm bell, or some people call them high-frequency lights. The point about that is it means that you can transmit through the electrical supply system a whole series of frequencies, which go into the electrical supply system into your home. You then switch on the light. The light is pulsing at those frequencies.
Yes.
Now the dominant frequency is going to be the 50 cycle thing. Now these things will rectify and then produce a lower voltage and then drive these bulbs. For instance, the bulbs we're using right now, LEDs. So the point about it is that these are LEDs, and this is DC light going into an LED, and you get light out of them. But the point about LEDs is the same basic technologies used to drive fiber optics and transmit ultra high frequency light data signals through fiber, right?
Okay.
The point about that is that if you wanted to send signals through the electrical supply system, for instance through a local substation, and you wanted to send that from that substation to that local community, you would then have the ability to send that through the lighting system the light that people have. And that is why they've got rid of tungsten light bulbs. The whole point about tungsten light bulbs is that tungsten light bulbs are very simple. It's just a wire going through there, and that heats up, and that dumps, because of the way that the glow, the persistence of glow from the actual wire, that basically dumps out all the high frequencies. So tungsten light bulbs are low frequency light bulbs. They will pulse to a certain extent slowly with 50 cycle electricity. They will go up and down slightly dimming, and you'll only notice that if you use a camera with the wrong shutter speed.
Okay.
And you're only illuminated with fluorescent light, with tungsten lights. There'll be a slight pulsing, which is why, for instance, in the cinema, all the lighting has to be DC lighting. For instance, this is direct current light. There's no pulses. So in cinema, the studios have to have direct current lighting, DC, no pulses, because they shoot at 24 frames per second, and if you've got lights which are pulsing at 50 cycles per second, there'll be a beat frequency then, and you'll see on the film the exposure will change very slightly.
Okay.
Right, roughly, I think 2 hertz. I think. So there'll be a sort of dimming effect on the lights, which you'll just see sort of very slightly on the exposed film, which means you have to use DC lighting. Of course, they don't do all that anymore, but that's to get across the fact that even with that, you will get a pulsing effect. The point about these are that these high frequency bulbs, and these ones, if I get this bulb here. Okay, this is a halogen bulb. It's not a halogen bulb. It's basically a fluorescent light. Basically, this technology is the same as the big long strip lights. The difference is that they've managed to miniaturize the electronics, so you can use them in this kind of size. Because normally with the strip light, you had this big coil about that long. It was a big heavy thing. Because they had a big long strip, so they could put this kind of stuff in that. So and these are things which make the buzz. To be buzzing with them if they get hot and all that, and they start falling apart. So the point is that, basically speaking, this is the same as a good old fluorescent strip light. Okay, this is a fluorescent tube which goes up along here in a way it is. But the difference with this is a high frequency. They use this what's called high frequency pulses in this. Okay. Now, the point about this is that this is actually a bifilar Tesla spiral. Okay, if you look down that's a bifilar spiral, right? So you've got 2 spirals here, not 1.
Okay.
And you have effectively a dipole, which is an antenna there.
Wow.
Now, the point is, I'm not saying they are actually using this right now, but I am suggesting this is very suspicious in terms of a bipolar microwave transmitting Yagi antenna. Now the point about a Yagi antenna is that it produces, you have a dipole and then you have a number of directors which direct it. Now whether this is transmitting back up this way into the ceiling or transmitting back down with more direction down that way, that to me is very suspicious in terms of a microwave antenna transmitter.
Wow, okay.
Right? Okay, so they're using the plasma, the plasma gas in there, which lights up. By pulsing that in a bifilar Tesla spiral, tells me they're doing something outside the normal 3-dimensional space with this stuff.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, that is a suspicious item. That doesn't mean it is. That doesn't mean I'm saying it is actually happening.
Yeah.
I just said that lights up about 3 LEDs on a bar graph of 5 of something dodgy is going on.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now the other ones were linear. In fact, that's the linear one up there. But essentially, it's the same basic design where you have the linear ones are like a good old UHF antenna. If you look at a UHF TV aerial, the length of the fluorescent tubes on the older lights are very similar to the same dipole that you get in a UHF TV aerial. Right?
Okay.
Now the point about a UHF TV aerial is it uses a flat piece of aluminium to transmit the UHF RF signal, radio frequency signal, to either transmit or receive it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
So these may be receivers or they may be transmitters. I think these are actually transmitters.
Okay.
Okay? I could be wrong. But the point is that by making them into a bifilar spiral, I think you're doing something different there. You're doing something and by pumping it in a different spatial dimension or something. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that.
Right.
But the point is to say suspicious.
Okay.
Now what's happening now is these LED lights are being now applied to everybody's lighting. Now the point about it is, unless you look at the actual construction of the actual light bulb itself, and there's a sufficient filtering capacitors in there to filter out any incoming high frequencies, or they could actually have what's called a band pass filter in there, where they actually allow high frequencies in, but for the most part will rectify and produce DC. I would suspect that possibly what they're doing, and I need to look at the construction of the electronics, and it needs to really verify this. So I could be wrong, but there's too much of a dodgy thing happening here that essentially our lighting, our street lighting, our domestic lighting are being replaced with devices which can transmit high frequency data directly optically into your mind.
Oh, God.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the point is the entire lighting system, street lighting system, is A, we're being saturated with Wi-Fi, and B, we're being saturated with electric lights which can transmit high frequency pulsed information. Alright?
Wow.
So that is why Rani Kilda subtly, whatever happened with the position that she was in, with the lights, meant that something put her into a form of shock, which meant she just collapsed and lost the use of her legs until she was away from that pulsed environment. It was just the position of those lights happened to set off a certain resonant frequency, which went bingo, you're done.
Yeah.
So this is a signature of a series of devices being put into our homes, along with smart meters and along with Wi-Fi. For instance, the British Telecom Wi-Fi hub I've got here has got so much bloody power on it. If you're anywhere near it, you're going to be pumping right into here. I've actually had an RF meter here, which is way off the scale. These little telephones are the same. These radio phones are the same sort of thing, where they're transmitting a lot of frequencies, very powerful digital frequencies. Now the point about this is, this is fear porn. What I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I don't want to. There's a difference being alerted, and a difference between being alarmist.
Yes.
I think we've gone past these two stages now. I think we now have to absolutely pay very real attention and take note, because we're now running out of time.
Okay.
So the point about this is that deals with the toxic energy mind control stuff through broadcasting, the electrical supply system, which is why they don't want anybody to go off grid. They want you to have solar panels. Again, the solar panels are grotesquely inefficient pieces of technology, again deliberately sold to us as that. They've got higher technologies which will work much more efficiently, where you have a solar panel where you have one photon from the sun goes into the solar panel. It has a cascading effect, so that you have maybe tens or hundreds of electrons freed in the solar panel to give you 100 times more electricity than you would have normally. And
well, that's very useful to know, because many people wouldn't know. They just think solar panels
the amount of electricity they produce is completely useless.
Okay.
Isn't
that similar to wind power as well, these windmills?
The whole purpose of wind power, and I was very pleased at the Bilderberger meetup, which we can talk about now. At the Bilderberger meetup, I met a lot of people I was familiar with, which is a big alarm bell for a start. In other words, they used the Bilderbergers. Before I go past this, the point about it is that she and a lot of other people have realized, in the same way that these are an antenna system for high frequency material, the wind farms and the wind power grotesquely inefficient, lumbering, useless for generating electricity devices. These stupid windmills, massive rotational forces, massive compressive forces on the vertical component of the blade. Then that swings down with centrifugal force, and then swings down plus gravity, pulling tremendous shears and stresses on the blade, and then up again, and repeating this every cycle. That is grotesquely inefficient, and it's designed to be that way. It's monumentally stupid engineering. Now the other point about it is that anytime you rotate anything through 90 degrees, you're doing something. Okay?
Yes.
This is one of the fundamentals of physics, or the fundamentals of electrical power generation. You have the right hand and the left hand rule, where the forces work at right angles. This is dimensional physics when you're dealing with starting dealing with right hands and left hands, and forces going one way and coming out another.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
These are dimensional signatures. So the point is, these things have a rotational force which then go into a long vertical pole. A long vertical pole is an antenna. It's going to be resonant, and it's going to be transmitting. And it's going to be transmitting as it wobbles.
Wow.
As the instabilities wobble, it'll go boop, 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 boop,
Yeah.
boop. Now the other thing you're going to have is with the rotational velocity of the windmill is at the very ends, you've got tremendously high speeds in terms of producing a vortex. Again, it's a spiraling effect that you got here.
Yes.
And that produces very high frequency noise signatures. So much so that when they developed them in Palm Springs, where I've been around the world's biggest wind farm, in the San Andreas Fault, that they actually admitted that in order to stop deafening and killing birds, they had to put a little hole in the very end of the wingtip of the windmill, so that you'd have an antinode at the end which would defeat the spiraling vortex of the wind noise at the very end.
Okay.
So by having a negative spiraling little tunnel at the very end, little spiraling tunnel,
Yes.
a hole at the end of a particular shape, which determines its frequency of resonance, its resonant frequency, that then would then reduce the effect of a very high frequency whistling ultra high frequency whistle at the ends of these blades.
Yes.
Okay, each blade based on its length will have a different frequency based on the velocity of the wingtip going past. This is the same rotational vortex that aircraft get rid of by having the little flip up bits at the end of the wing.
Gotcha.
It makes the wing a lot more efficient.
Yes.
It's also why when you take off, you can't have too many planes taking off at the same time because of the vortex from the wingtips, and also the vortex of the engine stuff that's coming out of the back end. So, but the point is that with wind farms, you're producing a number of deliberately inefficient sources of noise. And that means they are nothing to do with inefficiencies. They're designed to produce noise. They're designed to produce noise from the windmills section. They're designed to produce noise from the wubba effect in the air, but then in the ground, they actually place these things like a phased array. This is again standard antenna system, antenna gain. If you want to make something louder and directional, you put them in an array.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Now they'll say, oh, this is designed because of the vortex, so they won't want all this. This is all bollocks. And it would be important for somebody to have a look at where they're putting these wind farms, because they're putting them probably, I would gather, on energy sensitive zones on the Earth's grid, because they're attacking the Earth's natural grid, energy grid. This is all about attacking the Earth's energy grid, the natural energy grid, or the resonant energy grid of the planet. Now the point about this is, and I'll just say one thing, one of the crucial numbers on this is 137, and 137 comes up in the physics as one of the fractal numbers, which is crucial, sacred number, important number in our reality. And the frequency of my pirate station, which helped crack Matrix in 1988, 87, 88, 89, was KISS FM 103.7.
Okay.
137.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point about these wind farms is that you then produce a wubba effect, an extra low frequency wobble. So you've got the high frequency swish, high frequency. You've then got the wobble of the actual tower, and then the actual bass where these are all based in the ground,
Yes.
will put a rocking ELF motion into the ground,
God.
and then that will go out as a scalar exhalation frequency pattern into the ground.
God, it's
Okay?
horrendous. Yes.
Because people who've invented much more efficient windmill systems, which don't produce any noise, you can put them on your roof. They're much more effective. They don't have these huge physical arrays that people have to look at. They're all being pushed aside by the leading people who control this technology. Now, that means that the leading people who control this technology are clearly working against humanity because they are producing toxic elements into the whole environment.
Yes.
But they're saying, oh, we're green and we're saving the environment. This is all bollocks.
Yes.
These people, all of them, need taken out, arrested, the whole lot, by the intelligence agencies. We're now in a stage now where if humanity is going to survive, the relevant people who are in charge should take action against all of these people. I don't see that happening.
No, you're right.
Because we're now on the end of humanity's existence if we are going to have any further discussion about this. So that's that about the wind farm stuff, and that's that about what are we next talking about?
You wanted to speak about Marie Caillou?